Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Wild. This is a series 2 of my Wild with Sarah Wilson podcast. And my first guest is wonderfully and suitably wild. We'll get to her in a moment. But first, I will just recap. We can probably think of the first very long series of Wild as being an exploration of what the hell is happening or was happening to the world. And in the end, it became an exploration of complex systems collapse, a term experts use to describe the interconnected unraveling of all the many, many systems that make up our civilization. So everything from the fossil fuel system to the technology system to growth imperative structures, individualism, colonialism, and so on. But I feel a huge number of us are now at this juncture crying out for an exploration of, well, what comes next? That plays around with the life-generating wild ideas that might in fact form this what comes next, as I've started calling it. Now, I do believe that in the life-death life cycle that we exist in, what is dying, the old civilizational systems, will become the compost for what comes next, for the new world that is yet to be born or to emerge. But whenever I talk about this kind of stuff, I invariably get asked, okay, sure, I can understand this idea of systems dying off and ways of being becoming redundant or dead in the water and making way for new life. But how does this emergence actually work? How do we, the humans, emerge our way out of the current fiasco and toward the world we'd like to create? What will it look like? What might we want to start doing or being to be part of it all? Now, someone who can answer all this and more is today's guest, Samantha Sweetwater. Samantha is a systems thinker whose many decades of work, I think it's 3 decades of work, bridges complexity science and indigenous wisdom to help humans navigate this strange, important moment we find ourselves in. She's also a dance theorist, has a master's in wisdom studies, and has been initiated into indigenous lineages of Africa, Latin America, and Turtle Island. And her very recent book, True Human, Reimagining Ourselves at the End of the World, tackles exactly what I've been speaking about here. Now, as I've explained, in this series, I'm selecting guests who can speak directly to one of the big, gnarly questions we find ourselves facing as we start to imagine and create the what comes next. So I've asked Samantha to join us to answer this particular question. How do we actually emerge into this next world or this next new normal? How is this civilizational transition going to work? What will it look like or feel like? What narratives and psychological myths will we need to reroute? This is a naturally swirling, non-linear, emergent, entangled chat with lots of bird noises from outside, appropriately, touching on all kinds of tangible practices that get us into emergence, or what she and I call a homecoming, including dance, psychedelics, regenerative mindsets, as well as some very fresh explainers for the chaos that's going on at the moment. Okay, so with that, let's meet Samantha Sweetwater. Samantha, what a joy to see that face on my screen.
So good to see you, Sarah.
Yeah, well, this was, we had a few false starts getting to this kind of moment where we're actually sitting opposite each other chatting, but I feel that life is such a self-referring phenomenon at the moment. I kind of feel life is taking quite a lot of deliberateness and a lot of presence, and we've got to be a little patient with how things play out at the moment.
Mm-hmm. I feel the same way. And I also feel like, the river's moving so quickly that you don't always know who you're going to catch in the rapids or when.
Yeah, we've just got to be there, don't we? We've got to be in it, and ready,
yes.
as ready as we can be. But yeah, thank you for your patience and your presence on all of this. And it is wonderful to finally be here talking to you. Look, I might start by just landing together on where we find ourselves in the world today as humans. And the subtitle of your book references the end of the world. What do you actually mean by the end of the world?
Well, I mean that the world that we were promised, the world that built Western civilization, in a way, I could say 2 things. I could say the end of a worldview construct. Mm-hmm. So when I say the end of our world, I mean the end of the construct of human supremacy that has us somehow be immune to or separate from the biospheric processes that we're embedded within, somehow able to separate ourselves through linear logic from the nth order effects of our actions. It's the end of that world. It's the end of the world that believes in progress as an endless game.
Yeah.
And so that's both a worldview and a construct of the world, and it's also an actual world. It's like everything that built Western civilization is coming up for unraveling, reorganization, question. So I also mean, when I say the end of our world, I mean the end of, in my view, the end of human supremacy as a pattern through which we build systems and stories and protocols and practices. And not many people are ready for the end of that world, you know?
No. It's a better prospect, though, than considering the end of humanity, which is how a lot of people are framing what is going on. I think that's there's a fair bit of fear-mongering, there's a fair bit of misunderstanding, and it probably reflects your exact point. You know, it's been a very human-dominated or human-centric worldview that we've been living in. So, of course, when we say it's the end of the world or a world, we, of course, think it's the end of us.
Right. Right. And I tend to think of it as a beginning. I tend to think of it as an off-ramp from a very narrow version of what we are and can be as organisms, as beings, as spiritual creatures, as meaning-making creatures, that like we've cut ourselves off from such a rich fabric of relationality that earth-based cultures, indigenous cultures have always recognized that there's an aspect of what it is to be a true human being that is to be deeply in relationship with the environment we occupy, with the water, with the birds, with the seasons and cycles, with death, and with the interdependence that we share with all other beings and things. And, you know, from that view, to forget that is to forget what it is to be human.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is that there's an old world that's coming to an end, and I certainly share your thoughts on this, but something's going to take the place of it, right? So I really don't feel that the human story is done. I feel, though, however, we're going to have to go through some kind of epic transition. That's what I feel we're in. And as you allude to, that's actually a really frightening proposition, because we have been embedded in this linear, material, overlordy kind of mindset. We can't even think about what it is that we're going to be moving on to. And really, that's why I invited you here on Wild today, because it's a question that is looming for a lot of listeners. Anyone who's got a bit of a feel for collapse, and that's what we're talking about, the collapse of a particular worldview or system or world, invariably kind of asks, okay, and then what? And really, I want to discuss with you how we actually do that transition, how we be that transition. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What do we need to get on with doing and being to enable that to be part of it? I think it's really a great way to start this second series of Wild, because it's sort of the framing for what this could be. And I call all of this a bit of a homecoming. It's really coming back.
Totally.
To our true human, our true humanness.
Absolutely.
Look, a word that's often used in this space is emergence. And it's a word that I often use because I think I can kind of understand that, this idea of emerging into something. There's this relationality to it. There's this sense that it's what is being created is co-created, and it's bigger than the sum of its parts. So it's a word that sort of works for me. A lot of people in the complex systems space do use that word. Did you find that word is sufficient? Is that a word you use, or do you have a better
it's a really
sort of
useful
term?
word? I mean, I think emergence gives us a lens through which to soften our gaze and look at possibilities and tendencies and signs and symbols that are happening all around us, that we might not notice if we weren't looking through the eyes of emergence. So, really one of my favorite futurist kind of exercises is to look around for signs that the world that you're looking for is already occurring.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Like that's a way of looking for emergence before it's like really scaffolded at scale. But, an example would be more and more people are celebrating the solstice than I've ever seen before. More and more people are attuning to moon cycles than I've ever seen before. Like 2 years ago, summer solstice came and nothing was happening. This last summer and winter solstice, when solstice came, I can't even tell you how many events are happening and how many people are marking that. That is from the lens of emergence, that's human behavior starting to realign with the seasons and cycles that we're nested inside of, which is the gesture of homecoming. It's the gesture of moving back into alignment with life. So another way to say that I didn't say before, that I'll say this in the end of our world in a different way. Yeah. So one way to say the end of our world is that what's ending is the paradigm and all instantiations of our ways of being that are misaligned with the well-being and flourishing of natural living systems.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm glad you clarified that. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that sense, you could say what's ending and has to, and what it's not ending because it wants to, it's ending because it has to end. And a lot of it hasn't ended yet. It's fighting for its life. The misaligned system is fighting for its life, and it's willing to take down as much as it possibly can in the process. But what must emerge and what can emerge and what is starting to emerge very naturally in its place, and I say the word naturally in a very intentional way, because our bodies are co-adapted with the seasons and cycles and with the ecologies we live in and the organisms we co-inhabit this world with the water, with the temperature cycles of all of these things. So what can emerge and what is emerging is an impulse towards alignment. And that alignment is ontological. So it's alignment in all domains, at all levels of scale, all at once, as a kind of, it sounds impossible, but it's totally possible because it's a biophysical and biopsychological process that actually feels good to our nature as organisms who are perfectly designed to collaborate with the watersheds we occupy, with the soil, with the seeds, with the birds, and with our technological capacities to create ways of doing things, way of governing things, way of designing things, ways of transacting things, that and value that are aligned with a deeper sense of the well-being of life. Yeah. It's going to take sufficiency. It's going to take the death of a dream of more. It's going to take the death of greed. Gandhi said over and over again, there's enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. Yeah. And, when a natural living system is in a transition, what happens is there's stability and then there's disruption, and disruption liberates materials and energy and entities. And that's a space of chaos. And we're starting to enter into that. For a lot of people, they're holding on to stability, but disruption is getting bigger. And when disruption happens, there's release. And so we have this very like Hollywood driven idea of collapse, that it's a terrible nightmare and it's Mad Max dystopia and everybody sucks. In reality, most people were evolutionarily designed as beings who flourish in co-equality and mutual aid. That is part of our deep history on an evolutionary level. And I think you're going to interview Luke Kemp, but his book, Goliath's Curse, details
He's been on
that.
here already. He's been on I spoke to him just before the book came out. Yeah.
Amazing. His book is a wonderful depth illustration of our deeper evolutionary nature. So as disruption happens, there's this release of capacity. It's not like all the buildings fall down unless there's some massive earthquake. But what happens is there's people and there's agency and there's possibilities. And in that, there's an opportunity to reconfigure how
Gosh,
we
I've
do
never heard it
anything
put that way. This idea that, I mean, I've also interviewed on my Substack Live a thinker, political analyst who goes under the name of Oh, It's Rich. It's sort of an Instagram handle that he works to. But he exposed this notion of extinction burst. You know, there's this sort of rush of energy that comes forth when old systems are dying, and the people who benefit from it want to sort of do a last days of Rome grab at the assets and the mindsets that, you know, that benefit them before it all goes down. And that's how he describes what's happening, you know, particularly in the States under Trump's administration. But the way that you're framing it is a little similar to that. There's this idea that there's this, it's almost like I can see it as a blockage, a tension that has been put on top of our true nature. And as those systems fail to hold because they are just not congruent or attuned with the natural order of things, there's this sort of rush forward of energy and chaos as we all adjust. And at a really human level, I can feel that in myself when I look around the world. I can see this sort of, grabbing at old systems that people don't, you know, parts of the old system people don't want to let go of. There's this grabbing at new ways of thinking that kind of feel attuned, but then we get our linear, overlordy, you know, might is right way, grubby fingers on it, you know. And so there's this real eruption sort of happening, and that definitely feels like what we're in. As that original energy, that original truth of who we are, i.e. part of nature, to put it really simply, just wants to come forth. So what you're saying is, this kind of transition is going to just happen on its own, and there's going to be chaos in the interim. But you have mentioned a few times this idea of, well, we may, and there's the opportunity to, and we could, right?
Well, and it doesn't have to be chaos in the interim, right?
Okay.
It's not all happening. It's happening ridiculously quickly, but it's not all happening all at once or at the same pace in the same places. And people are still here. Our technological capacities, at least some of them are, and will continue to be still be here. I mean, I spent the weekend at a conference called Funding the Commons. There are people all over the world working to scaffold new governance systems, new coordination systems, new cosmolocal, meaning more localized ways of doing energy and light industry and building supplies and food distribution. That's happening very quickly. And a lot of, there's work right now to establish data sovereignty protocols so that we could migrate this potentially onto our phones or other devices. That's happening very, very quickly. It's not like in collapse, all of a sudden there's nothing. There's no capacity. Like we have this kind of false idea that it happens all at once, and it doesn't have to be chaos. I mean, and some of the transitional behaviors, are all of the transitional behaviors are relational, to the degree that we're building strong relationships with our neighbors, to the degree that we are participating in more generosity, less hoarding. It's like one way that the transition could happen very gracefully is if we flipped from status being in acquisition to status being in sharing. Mm-hmm. And anyone can start to set up those cultures at any level of scale in our own lives. And then those patterns spread because reciprocity is contagious. Yeah. Reciprocity is deeper to our biology than selfishness is. And that keeps being proven out over and over and over again. It's proven out when there's large scale ecological restoration projects, and it's proven out when there's opportunities to support people in disaster zones. Yeah. And so it doesn't have to be total chaos, but we have to be open to shifting the patterns through which energy, information, and value flow.
Okay, well, let's drill down into that a little bit. You've touched on a few things, like practical things that people can do and mindsets already, just lightly, but I'd love to cover off a little bit in a more granular way some of the things that we can do, because as you say, there's an option here, right? And even in this moment, but also in terms of where we end up long term, because I think a lot of people are sensing we are moving into a different way of looking at things, but it's extremely hard to get there with the mindset that we currently have. It's a sort of an undoing. It's a really, I can feel it in my own brain when I sort of find myself going fully left-brained, you know, it's like I'm, you know, having to turn the Titanic to kind of move into the right brain. But once I do, it feels natural. It does. And there's a sense of ease. That's a word that comes up a lot for me, a sense of ease and a relaxing into and a sense of relief when we kind of clock it, when we touch it, you know. Mm-hmm. So could you talk through some of the techniques and practices and mindsets and philosophies that work for people to be able to start moving in that direction, start to be in this transition now, you know, because I think a lot of people are impatient to get on with this, you know. We can see that there's something better around the corner.
Totally. I mean, I think that what's showing up as the first kind of overview shift of sensing is that we all live in places. It's like this shift from in the mind of human supremacy and the mind of separation, we see ourselves as individuals who are unmoored, not particularly deeply moored in place. We have planetary membership. We can get things from anywhere. We can go anywhere we want. That might continue to be true. It might not. It might not. But one way or the other, like the first shift to me is the recognition that we are embodied beings who live in bodies that are embedded in places. Those places biophysically take on the shape of being watersheds. These are just the natural structures through which life flows. All of us live in watersheds. It's good to know what your watershed is. I live in the Tennessee Valley watershed on the south arm of Mount Tamalpais in Mill Valley, California, which also happens to be the territory of the southern band Miwok tribe of the Hukuiku, who call themselves the Hukuiku people. It's good to know those things, but also to start to build relationships with your local ecology, with your local watershed, with the water itself. If collapse happens, you're going to need to know where the springs are. But then the next layer out is to know that you are a part of a bioregion. And if this transition goes well, we will probably recenter governance around bioregions, because bioregion is a natural country. It's a country that's a biocultural space that is more defined by geography and by the natural intelligences and challenges and gifts and culture of that place. That is a piece of how you can how any individual can start to kind of sense make, how shall I generate resilience in my own life? And furthermore, in my children's lives, because this re-anchoring in place and taking care of place, we don't take care of what we're not identified with. So a big piece of the shift is to recognize that we are bound to these places, that we are connected to them. Even if you travel around the world quite a lot, there's usually 2 or 3 places that are primary homes. And re-anchoring in those relationships as relationships that require reciprocity. They require some level of groundedness in care and responsibility that is political care. It might be habitat restoration care. It might be legal care around making sure that ecology is robust. It might be fiscal participation in regenerative agriculture or in different cultural programs or in developing a bioregional resilience hub, which is happening all over the world. That is, I think, one of the single deepest pieces that has bearing on who we are as individual beings and on who we are as political beings and as eco-spiritual beings. It's like all of those things all at once.
Yeah. So you're almost, I mean, this is a horrible phrase to use just after you've said all of that. it kind of kills, many birds with one stone. Isn't that a terrible phrase to use at this juncture? But anyway.
It kills many birds with one tone, as someone
Thank you. Thank you for rephrasing that, Samantha. But yeah, what you're saying, I mean, from what I pick up is that by getting to know your local environment, where you are, your place, is a way to basically really connect in with that sense of belonging. You touch it, you feel it, you see it, you're in it. But it's also the focal point for where this change is going to happen, where we're going to head to next. I think we do have a sense that it's going to comes up all the time. It's going to be localized, smaller communities where we really get to know the relationships and we work in relationship. A lot of what has landed us in where we are today is this complexifying and getting bigger and bigger, more and more growth, more and more progress, and it's just got out of hand. The solution, the salve to that is go back to small local communities. So it's kind of a bunch of things happening at once. And you're saying that's almost not the silver bullet, but it's a really good starting place for.
It's a pattern, right?
It's a pattern. Okay. Yeah.
It's a pattern. So part of the shift, I think, in worldview is to become better at patterns and less rigid in forms.
How can we do that? How can we get better at patterns?
This is an example. To see oneself as a physical body, an organismic physical body that is nested inside a place and inside a planetary process. To practice, for example, I keep looking out the window because there's a tree outside my window that I have this very deep relationship with. To practice breathing the breath of the tree, for example. There's the exquisite reciprocity that is occurring all the time. I think this is one of the ways that we can begin from the inside out with this pattern of here I am in this place and all places are connected, and to practice the patterning of interbeing. Starting from the exhale that I make that then is the inhale of the tree. Mm-hmm. And being in that cycling and reciprocity. I think it's a shift from the way we've been taught to be, to think in terms of the linear processes of left brain thinking, to a sense of slowing down to sense and feel the patterns of how life works that are not separate from how our own lives work.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I love about this is there's so much beauty in it. I think about the science of the planetary boundaries as symphony. Mm-hmm. It's an extraordinarily accurate and detailed left brain map of where we've pushed beyond 7 of the 9 planetary boundaries within which life safely operates. We've caused that. But if you can also look at it as this extraordinarily symphonic mapping of what we might want to repair and learn new ways to interact with the phosphorus and nitrogen cycle and food and farming generally, learn new ways to interact with transportation and energy use that are more refined and aligned with the health of the biosphere on a metabolic level. I think that pattern tracking is exquisite because you can start to feel it for yourself of how is this like that, and showing me a deeper pattern that's the way life functions.
I am a mad pattern observer. My brain naturally works that way. And I find it really interesting that you point to, sort of the work that's been done on the planetary boundaries out of the Stockholm Resilience Centre. And, as a beautiful, awesome thing, right? So all these structures that we've set up with our left brain ways, our linear ways, can still be used. We can still find the beauty in them, right? For what's ahead. We don't have to throw everything out. It's about,
oh no.
Yeah, it's about,
we need it.
because everything we have done is still quite beautiful. And, you know, it's a really big part of the work that I do is to get people to sort of almost have a compassion for our earnestness, right? We have been trying so hard and efforting so hard to kind of, you know, conquer nature. In many ways, what we've been doing has been really quite beautiful. It's just been heading in the wrong direction, right? We've been misguided. We've been distracted. We've been blocked. And we can take so many aspects of our human nature which just come out, right? Like you say, they're there, they're busting to be expressed, and we've just sort of pointed them in problematic directions over the last couple of 100 years. One of the things that you talk about as well, which I really like, and it got me into a sort of a beingness, into a presence, was you talk about referring to your identity in verbs as opposed to in nouns. And that exercise in itself, I think, takes us to that more embodied relational way of seeing the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think one aspect of modernity is that we've been taught to think of ourselves as a journalist or as a teacher or as a coach, as a business person. And that then we get very identified with what that role is supposed to do or fulfill.
Yep.
And I mean, there's kind of a deeper listening to the friend. I don't just think of myself as a verb. I think of myself as a soul, and I sense and feel myself as a soul who is here seeking to embody and enact an authentic expression of this self. And so the way that occurs, the way I feel that is as a verb, or as of a beingness and becomingness process. It's like in this moment, I'm not like standing outside of myself and thinking of myself as an author or a speaker or an interviewee. I'm here with you in the gesture of sense making together. And that's what's more alive. What's more alive is the unfolding process of living. And then from a kind of a self-inquiry place, a place of the inquiry into purpose, like, am I living in alignment with my purpose here in this world? The way I feel that is as an unfolding that feels like it feels authentic. It feels like I'm well used. It feels like I'm engaging and enacting the different capacities that I've been gifted with and pushing ones that are harder, that are in alignment with what I love and care about. And that is an unfurling verb.
Yes. What does it feel like? I mean, I sometimes talk to people about the fact that when I feel like I'm in alignment and the universe says yes, I see things in color. And when it's not quite right, I see it in a gritty black and white. And, even smells as well. So, I'll smell my sense of alignment, So for you, what's this feeling of attunement and alignment feel like? How, are you able to use words to describe it?
I mean, when I'm in alignment, there's a spectrum from it being just very quiet and like there's not a lot of feeling, like there's a quietude to it, to like a happiness that isn't a hedonic happiness. It's more like a felt sense of being in flow. And I love the things feel more colorful because I think that's true for me too, actually. And then when I'm out of alignment, there's like often this like very gritty, it's like if I thought about it, it would be like I'm walking through oatmeal. Like, and if I'm dreaming, like my dreams in those spaces are like I can't move. Like I will have dreams when I'm in that space.
Yep.
Yeah. And the dreams are like there's binding on the inside of my body and I'm not walking forward. And then like when I'm in alignment, all my dreams are all kinds of other things. I might journey to other places. Occasionally there's flying, there's exploring new possibilities that are on this horizon of emergence that are sometimes very personal and sometimes they're collective. And But yeah, it's interesting to describe it. And I have said, I feel like I'm walking through oatmeal before.
Oatmeal, okay, yeah. Porridge, as we call it in Australia and in the UK.
Yeah.
That's a good way of feeling it. It's sticky and sludgy and just hard work. There's no ease. I'm now using that, and it's taken me, 52 years to get there, but I'm now using those feelings. I've read about it, I've intellectualized it for years, but the urgency of where we're at is, and sort of the pain and the grief of where we're at is taking me to the spot where it becomes so obvious that this is the way to go. I am using the, let's say, color black and white, or the ease and flow versus oatmeal gauge to steer my decisions. And it's a practice. It really is a practice. And it reminds me of something else that you write about in your book, the importance of having devotional practice around this. And that, in fact, this is a devotional practice.
Totally.
Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I imagine it incorporates sort of having rituals, which, the neoliberal system has kind of, brushed away over the last couple of decades and centuries. But also you might want to veer things into dance, because that is an area of expertise that you have. And it's also something that I've been talking about as a technique, a way of entering into embodiment for anybody who's finding it difficult.
Yeah. I mean, so the upstream about like this following alignment for me is that I have a spiritual perspective on what's happening right now, which is that we're going from a world that has tried to fit us all into these boxes of modernity, where the job of a human is to fit in as a cog of the machine, to make as much money as possible, and to retire happily. And
with as little expense to the medical system,
as possible. Yes. Having had 2.3 kids, it's like, that's the job of a person. And in the way that I see this space that we're in, there's a liberation back into our place in the planetary process, like from being on the earth to being part of the earth, figuring out how the earth could continue, and therefore we could continue. And that there's a spiritual dimension to that, which is liberating the soul to do, be, and become all the things that we might be and become inside a more diverse ecology of humans who are gifted with all kinds of capacities. And this isn't just my idea. Like in traditional Maori education systems, this is a known understanding of the nature of humans. And young people are taken all over the village and given opportunities to try it and be exposed to different things. And the older people track, like, what lights this person up? Where is this person come alive? That's a way of understanding what soul ecology is. So then practices that we would want to do are also about helping to come into devotion to who and what we are as souls, which is to be in devotion to the world, because the world is ensouled. So, it's not just like humans have souls and everything else is dead or dumb. It's like what we know now is that increasingly we are very clear that other organisms have consciousness and have different kinds of culture and names and cognition that human supremacy erased. We are starting to be unable to ignore this, even on a scientific level. And so there's many practices that can help open that up. Dance is one of my favorites. Dance was the one that I found instinctively as a teenager. I wasn't really supposed to dance. I have a younger sister. It was her thing. I wasn't supposed to do it. She stopped dancing and I was like, okay, finally I can dance. And I started locking myself in the wrestling room of my high school and making choreographies about spiritual states with no names and what it means. Why is there war? What is it to fall in love? And what does it mean to come home?
How old were you at that stage?
I was 14.
Yeah. Okay.
And no one taught me how to do it. I just started doing it. And it's interesting what you say about this being a homecoming, because home was my central inquiry. And I think that's a piece of what carried through like the intersection of spiritual work and work around existential work around existential risk and collapse, is because as I studied home, and I studied it in my own experience, and I studied it in groups, like I was facilitating inquiries, really altered state inquiries through movement, often around what does it mean to come home and how can we feel belonging together. And what was really clear to me from a really early age was that this kind of spiritual truism that we've inherited from modernity, that homecoming is an internal process, was only partially true. And if it was held all by itself, it was pathological.
Yes,
because
narcissistic and
because homecoming is something we can only do together. And like the biggest possible version of that is, let me be part of co-creating a world where all beings come home, because I can be at home there and then we can all be at home there. And it's like, it's a vision of peace, but it's also a vision that's social and political and spiritual and very disruptive to like the way in which we've been taught to be. So
it's hard to be with other humans. It is hard.
Totally.
And being relational, I mean, we've got a whole generation who are avoiding relationships, doing them at a distance over a screen and so on. It is something that, as with many things about the human endeavor, the things that are really hard and take a struggle and take going down into ourselves spiritually and having a good hard look at ourselves, they're the things that are the most rewarding in the end.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Which is why cultures in the past have put so much work into rituals, into practices, into mores, into even just physical structures that ensure we remain relational, because that is who we are. We rose to, I hate using this phrase again, I'm bringing out all the terrible ones for you, Samantha, but we rose to the top of the food chain, right? Like we've been able to survive only because we're relational and we've prioritized it. And we are a generation, or a few generations, a civilization that has deprioritized it. But yeah, the dance kind of is a little bit of a silver bullet. It gets us to
it is,
all
because
of
it's
that.
relational. It's implicitly relational. And
not just to other people either. It's to the room, the music, so many things. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And it's like, it's an antidote in a way to the hyper-individuation paradigm. And in that sense, also, if one has a mindfulness practice, if one has a meditation practice, the dance takes you off the cushion and it throws you into that chaos of space and music and people and your own body. And that's really healthy. It's like it puts you outside of control and into curiosity and inquiry and relationship. And I feel like dance, as a practice, it is kind of a hack. It really takes you out of, I love how it takes you out of control and puts you into relationship
and uncertainty. I've sort of read a bit of science when I was writing my book about how and why dance works, and and observing how it popped up in times of crisis around the world, when there was a real disruption. In the medieval period, during the Black Plague, people danced. What was remaining of the villages, there were these monks that you've probably read this work as well, but monks traveled across Europe and came across villages that, only 10% of the population of the village remained, and they were dancing. They would just dance and dance and dance. And the same thing happened in the 1920s, in that liminal period between the two world wars. There were these dance marathons where people would almost dance into a stupor of sorts. And I remember sort of reading something that said that what it does is gets us okay with uncertainty. Because everything about dancing is moving into the uncertainty and seeing what happens. It's sort of like this large experiment with the actual true nature of life, which is uncertain,
Completely.
And in a time of crisis, that's, that is a superpower if you can be with uncertainty. Yeah, no, I really like that dance one, and I'm glad we had time to talk about that as well. Are there any other devotional practices that you do? Like, is it literally going staring at your tree out the window and observing the patterning?
My practices are very simple. I hike. I make a prayer every morning. I think one of the things, like, there's a lot of us do a lot of rituals, but we don't think of them as rituals. Just to take a little, like, I meditate every morning. I try to meditate with my feet on the earth and the sunrise. So it kind of also hits a lot of buttons all at once. The morning sun also is really helpful to get your melatonin working properly. It's like all of these devotional practices, they're meta relational in that you're reconnecting with the deeper patterns that are co-generating life. And so it also makes your life work better. The practice that it's hard, I don't really think of it as a practice because it's so deep in terms of who I am. Like, people talk about spirit guides or totems, or I use the word in my book, amakua, which is a Hawaiian word that basically means what you're devoted to and responsible for that is also responsible for you. So because this has been such a big part of my life, I don't have just like one practice, because I'm hardwired to be open to when a being or a thing really calls to me, which doesn't happen all the time. You know, after 54 years of my life, I have collected a lot of amakuas and things that I am responsible for. So what I want to offer to readers is to really open to the fact that there are beings and things in this world that are calling to you to specifically be responsive to them and to care for them. And the way that calling happens is it's like unique to every person, and it's unique to every soul. So there isn't a practice to get you there. There's the opening of a window, like in basic intuitive training. One of the first steps is to suspend disbelief. So you have to like suspend the disbelief that there isn't a dialogue. You have this belief, oh, there's no dialogue between me and the tree. There's no dialogue between me and the song sparrow. That's the one that makes me cry every time I hear it. It's just me crying.
Yeah.
You know, but if you suspend the disbelief and you ask the question, you hold the inquiry, could it be that there are beings or things that are uniquely speaking to me, that if I paid attention to them, it would show me the pattern of my own devotion? And so the practice is this inquiry. Could it be that there are beings or things that are showing me, that are already speaking to me, that if I were to pay attention, they would show me my unique relationship to them, and those are my amakuas, those are my totems. And that might be water, it might be clouds, it might be lightning, it might be the song sparrow. It's one of my strongest relationships in my personal ecology. I have a really strong relationship to poison oak. I love poison oak. It's a disruptor plant. It's like does all these amazing things in the ecology. It might be one of the particular, where I live in a grassy ecology. So I track all the grasses every spring and when they come up, but there's one that I love particularly. And so my whole relationship now with the cycles of rain and the progressions of these grasses on a seasonal level is tuned to the rattlesnake grass, because I love the rattlesnake grass. And it turns out that the rattlesnake grass is very, very different every year, depending on all these other cycles and pulsations in the weather and in the temperature and in the rain cycle. And so that's one of the organisms in my ecology that like I feel a particular care and responsibility for, and it's showing me other patterns in the process. So, you know, a lot of people will find that they have a relationship with water, and sometimes a very specific relationship, like to a certain coastline or to a particular creek or to the salmon, or like all of these are water relationships that,
Mountains are a good one as well. I'm thinking of Nan Shepherd's beautiful homage to the mountain, and I certainly share that. I've always felt that mountains, there's been certain mountains that are my friend. When I sit on them, I feel like I'm sitting next to it, observing the world with the same lens as this very, very still behemoth, that's holding me, cradling me. I find myself jumping to, does Samantha have practices that stop her looking at her phone? Because when I think about all these things, it's so beautiful to hear you talking about it, to basically bear witness to the incredible, awesome entity that is life, right? So it's like not wasting a single moment of it, because this is the magic. This is the thing that we get gifted with. And, that is what devotion is. Devotion is not to a God, it's to the patternings, the just insane connectivity and sense, there's sense to it all. And we're just part of it. And I get these I've had, very distinct, overwhelming moments in my life. And I can tell you my phone has never been with me at those moments. And I'm just wondering, do you, because this is the question that comes up all the time from listeners, from people in the street, people I meet, is I'm addicted to my phone. What do you do with your phone, Samantha? Do you have to be vigilant, or have your devotional practices managed to make your phone seem like one of those gritty oatmeal sludgy things that you just don't want to go near? Have you got to that enlightened point?
No, I have not, but there's some basic things. My partner has gone black and white screen.
Oh yeah. Audrey Tang's a big one for that.
Yeah. I find that, I actually can't even find my way around. Like I lose time to black and white screen because I'm so color oriented that I can no longer navigate. Like it actually doesn't work.
You've got to reprogram your brain. You don't have time for that. Yeah. Get it?
Yeah. But I have erased the apps that are most dangerous for me on the phone. And what was interesting to find was that Facebook was actually the most dangerous. And so Facebook is gone, and Facebook is generally gone because Facebook is dying. My basic practice with my phone is I seek not to engage with it for the first hour of my day. That is not always the case. And so for all practices of discipline, I have I think what's interesting about having a practice of discipline is that you have then the choice about, can you hold that with self-love and forgiveness and repair with yourself? So there's a higher order of practice to all practices of discipline, because when you make boundaries for yourself, there's two practices that come up. One is keeping the boundary, and then one is how you relate to yourself if you break the boundary.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And
so what will happen?
Yeah. What do you do with that then when you break a boundary?
I have a very healthy, I feel like I'm a really good parent to myself. Like I'm like, that was not optimal. Take the correction. The healthy relationship to it is to look at the consequences of it for yourself and acknowledge them, and then say, and I'm going to make another choice tomorrow morning.
Okay. Rather than tomorrow it starts.
Suck.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's the dialogue. You should have heard my dialogue. My dialogue. I'm like, bloody hell, Sarah, you've done it again.
Yeah. I mean, the other
it's actually quite a friendly dialogue. I actually have developed a dialogue over the years where I find it funny. I find that helps,
Totally.
I go to like, oh, yeah, there you go again.
Oh, completely. Yeah, sometimes I call myself a twit. I think I'm adorable when I'm a twit. So it's
It really does help with, the recorrection is when you don't hate yourself too much.
Completely.
Look, a question that keeps coming up for me, I know through all of this, these practices, the way you talk about them actually take me into that space. I also think talking about having a conversation like this is part of the emergent process, right? Like is wrangling with it and twisting and turning with it and seeing where certain things pop up and feeling how our reaction to the things that we say to each other. But I think, and this comes from a linear framing, I appreciate that, but My question is, how does that then go from just the individual and my immediate surroundings, my community, working in and around this? Obviously it does have a very infectious impact. Like we mentioned before, I think Adam Mastroianni does a lot of work in this space, that kindness and supporting each other is really contagious, right? We are more programmed to be that way than not, despite what we see out there in the world at times. And so how do we go from sort of these small little communities of doing this kind of thing to the new world that we're talking about? How does this transition occur? And I know that you've looked into past societies, but also at other cultures and how they manage to take this relationality and sort of take it out further, to scale it. Have you got any sort of ideas as to how that's going to go?
Well, we don't know. Right. But the answer is we don't know. And there are things that need to be built. Like the only way to scale things in a 8+ billion people process is to work with technology to scale things. Like the only things aren't going to just scale magically because they make sense. Culture is very complex and very, very fluid, and all kinds of people are going to make sense of what's happening in all kinds of different ways. Incentive structures have to shift at scale. That would be a technological process. Some of the things I mentioned that colleagues of mine are developing around emergent governance systems, emergent coordination systems, that is a key to things shifting at scale. We will need different incentives, different governance structures, and different ways of transacting coordination. Audrey Tang's work is amazing around that in terms of citizens' assemblies and large-scale democratic governance processes that upregulate unlikely consensus. All of that works because of technology, and it's a way of working with the affordances of the kind of technology. This goes back to the left brain, right brain integration, that this is not just a right brain process. It is a path that will probably have us live more in our right brains, but not at the exclusion of the left. And it will leverage these incredible gifts of our technological and scientific and cultural evolution towards emergent coordination, decision-making, and value systems, right? So one way to get there is, if you are a developer or a designer or a creator, is to start building towards those things. The other is to look out into the community of people developing those things around civic coordination, around regenerative finance, around regenerative anything. Like regenerative is a key word, and that community is massive, and there's incredible work going on to scaffold new governance and incentive structures, and ways of coordinating in different contexts, whether that context is the food system as a context, or whether that context is a city as a space of governance. AI is a key, but not AI that subsumes human intelligence, but AI that upregulates the granularity within conversations between people. So like Audrey Tang's Polis is an example of right use of AI, where that AI is collating information to help people see each other better and communicate better across differences, where they start to realize that those differences aren't so insolvable as they thought they were. There's so much going on there. Then another thing that people can, if you are a wealth holder, the bald reality is that everything that wealth is based on is about to crumble. That wealth will not be here for very long. So anyone listening who's a wealth holder, you may want to consider putting your resources and your capital into people and projects that are scaffolding emergent systems and structures to catch us when the old system crumbles. That's the only resilient choice at this point, in terms of, it's not the only one, but it's a very, very critical choice, is to put will behind capital to help so many of the people building these emergent systems and structures are unfunded or underfunded, unrecognized, partly because what they're working on is very complex and it will entail a migration of incentive, which means a shift in how we do value. Right. So that's a wicked problem. Like there's the truism, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. And wealth holders need to imagine the end of capitalism, like right now, because we need some of that capital to help scaffold emergent coordination architectures. And also potentially new tech architectures that are where on the level of the chip or on the level of the device, the data is sovereign.
Yeah. All these conversations, as you say, are happening. There's new technologies being built and old technologies being used in different ways. And it's happening very, very fast. We don't see it about the place because it's not where the leadership is based. You know, it's not what the media is interested in. It's not what's dominating at the moment. But I agree with you. These things are emerging, doing their emergent thing, bringing forth our true humanity because it's aching to come forward. It's aching to be expressed. We are aching to be attuned with nature. Do you feel like what can we all do? What can we all do to ensure you've given us so many tips on what we can, you know, is to be local, get involved in these kinds of things. Do we also need to trust that the emergent thing will do its emergent thing, that it's contagious? We've brought up all of these themes in this conversation, you know, that the things that are attuned to life are contagious. They will spread. They'll develop a life of their own. Because, you know, this question still remains for me is how does this go to scale? How do we go from where we are now, where it's messy and liminal and uncertain, into the what comes next? I'm aware that my question actually answers itself in many ways because what we're moving into is an ongoing liminality, an ongoing uncertainty. That's part of what we're about now, you know?
I mean, where I sit, I do trust. And I think trust without action is
that's the word.
Laziness.
Trust.
Yeah. I mean, I do trust and I nurture the process with trust. With trust and care and devotion and prayer and gratitude and praise and poetry and celebration and dance and ceremony. And I think this isn't a life to be sleeping. You know, I think it's a life to be awake and be engaged, and that the patterns and pathways are somewhat well defined. There's domain. I think we all are going to be called to areas where we're engaged in protection and preservation and what Joanna Macy called holding actions. I like to call stopping actions, like where we're called to be in the fuck no, like you can't extract that water, you can't kill those wolves, you can't cut down the forest, et cetera, et cetera. You can't put that new petroleum mine, you know, you can't put that new mine there, you can't blow that mountaintop off, et cetera, et cetera. And to build new systems, which could be so simple. That could be around building a phone tree with your neighbors and starting to create a resilience network in your own neighborhood, and learn who is disaster prepared, as well as sharing tea and getting to know each other's kids and who has cancer and needs help to the hospital. Like, this is just good humaning.
Yeah.
And then there's emergent stories and myths and ways of being. And what's so beautiful about that is if you just take the view that you're part of life, not separate from it. You're a participant, you're a co-creator, that your life is a thread in the ongoing emergence of this miracle called life, then those new stories and practices emerge naturally from that.
Yeah, in some ways, the answer to what does emergence look like, it's this. It's what's happening now. We're in it now. This is it. Yeah. I have one last question before, actually it's a penultimate question, because I feel I must need to ask this. This is an area that you are also doing a lot of work in. Not a lot of work, but it adds to your arsenal of wisdoms and tools and so on is the use of psychedelics in all of this. It's obviously become a very popular thing amongst the tech bros and other bros. But I think that there's a lot of people in this space, in the emergent space, the connecting back into nature space, that find that psychedelics can actually help this process. You don't have to go into great detail, but how does it? What is the gift of psychedelics in this moment?
They help the whole process to move faster. Psychedelics really help us to reaccommodate to reality. When we work with psychedelics in a way that's grounded, they help us be more attuned to the nature of life. I think what's most important if one is to work with psychedelics is to approach them as allies and guides, with humility, rather than as something like a new experience that's a commodity to be consumed. To approach them as with sobriety and with seriousness, with a recognition that like they are molecules, plants and fungus and animal materials and molecules that humans have developed that are they fit miraculously into our brain in a way that opens us to more of the aliveness. And in that way, they are such incredible allies for this path forward. They can help guide our vision. They can help guide our sense making. They can help make a deeper space for the grieving that needs to happen. They can help us feel safer to grieve together, which is not something most people talk about with psychedelics, but one of the outcomes of the psychedelic state is feeling more safe to feel your feelings with other people. And that's a really precious thing. I think it's very important to work within a context that is explicitly in devotion to life, as opposed to like kind of trying to solve the problem of life or, again, consume an experience. And in that sense, it's important to find a good guide or a grounded context to work with them in. I like to think, that they've come to us just in time, that the planet has sort of offered them as a dispensation to help align us with her higher potential.
Yeah. We can't be too cynical about the fact that they've become popular at this moment. Right. I think we've got to see, again, it's all part of a patterning, right? That makes deep sense. And in many ways, not always, but I find that psychedelics are just instant humblers, and I think we're going to need to touch the humbling or the humbled space a lot more to get through what we're going through. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've explained that beautifully. Thank you, Samantha. Look, the last question, because I know that we've gone over time, but I didn't want to stop this conversation because I was getting a lot out of it personally. But look, there's a question I'm going to be asking all guests in this series, and it's essentially a sort of a gritty, granular question. Like, how are you coping? How are you, Samantha Sweetwater, really, I guess, staying truly human in all of this? Mm-hmm. I imagine that you've got something very particular that, might be right at the moment that you're having to do to keep sane, to keep grounded, to keep humble, to keep yourself in this.
Yeah. I love attending to what I call the local news, like the birds outside, the clouds, the sunrise. Mm-hmm. I think my favorite, I love this phrase, the local news. And I've been saying to the people lately, like, the local news is great. FYI, by the way, the local news is great. My freesias smell incredible, So my practice, and this is related to the cell phone practice, is like the antidote to cell phones is to do the things that keep us off the cell phones. So I water my garden and I plant my bulbs, and I'm about to put together new planter boxes that I'm a little afraid this summer's heat is going to kill whatever I plant, but I'm going to plant them nonetheless because it's the right thing to do. And I think that there's the dimension of staying very grounded in my morning, in my daily practices. There's the dimension, I mentioned in the last conversation we had, there's the dimension of really maintaining sovereignty of my dreams.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something I try to do like kind of on a weekly basis.
What do you mean by that? When you say you maintain the sovereignty of your dreams, talk me, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Oh God, there's so many things I do to stay human in this time. So one is morning gratitudes and meditation. One is doing all the things that just are like really simple human things, like cooking, planting my garden, simple things like that are very simple. One is caring for the sovereignty of my dreams, which for me means that when I go to sleep at night, a lot of indigenous traditions take the view that our dreaming is as real as waking reality, and that what we dream deeply impacts what arises in the world. And I feel some connection to that teaching. And so when I go to sleep at night, I set a conscious space around myself, like of my own energy, my own sovereignty, and make a prayer that my dreams are generative and beautiful. And that's one of my practices for staying human in this time. I'm really rigorous about my friendships and being in connection to my family. Both of those are really important to me. And what's interesting about staying human in this time is it's not that different than what would be staying human in any time.
No,
it's not. It's like there's this kind of paradox that it's actually not that special. It's just
we do it anyway. Specific. And in many ways, that's kind of the gift of collapse. And I say this often is it's forcing us with its urgency, with its kind of, overwhelm that it's, bringing upon us. It's forcing us to do the things that we've always wanted to do, that we'd want to be doing anyway, really. We're being taken to the point that we've known we've had to go to for a long time, and it's speeding it all up for us. And so the question that, I set out to ask you is, how is this emergent thing going to happen? How are we going to transition? Collapse is probably going to take us there. The death of the old system is going to get us to get very real and very close, touching that which we are, which is the natural part of the natural systems and patternings. And all those practices you've talked us through make so much beautiful, gentle, real sense. And Samantha, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to explain it all to us, to be very, very present with me. I appreciate it.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you, Sarah.